Okay, good morning, everyone.
Good morning, sir.
The time is 10:05, so we are going to start. We have about 31 people attending. I know some of you may be sharing systems, and some will probably be on the way, being delayed to wherever it is that they have access to internet. But we'll start now so that if network issues crop up, we would have done as much as we can, and then we'll try to manage the situation. I hope that's okay with you.
Yes, sir. It's fine, sir.
Okay. Now, for today, we are going to be talking about free will and Nigeria's criminal jurisprudence as our offering for the second semester law and social change. Now, the reason we've taken these, of course, there are other topics that you are doing with other lecturers, but the reason I have taken this, there are two topics I normally would take for the second semester, either or. I either take free will, which we discuss, or I take the cultural defense, which we discuss. But for this semester, we are taking free will. And the reason I think free will is particularly interesting for this semester is because it's an extension of some of the studies that we've done for the for jurisprudence and legal theory for the second semester. And I think in free will as a topic, you will see the importance of the realist school and the sociological schools of law. And when you see that, it becomes much easier to appreciate the level of the amount of work that they were doing in terms of having law interact with the society. And in that interaction, it becomes easier to see law's predominance over all things. But even more particularly, the fact that law is predominant, but it still lags behind in terms of lawmaking. And the sciences are ahead in terms of development, and law is constantly trying to catch up. I hope we are still together as I'm talking.
Yes, sir, we are.
Okay. Now, we've chosen free will for two basic reasons. Number one, it starts as a foundation for you in terms of how to do critical thinking. So it's an example of just one little infinitesimal area of critical thinking for a law student. Because when we talk about law and social change, we look at law and social change as trying to think in a futuristic manner as to what currently we have as the law or the absence of it, and then how we can change it for the betterment of our society for the future. And there are a lot of areas where there are very little discussions or no discussions at all. It was just recently that we had in our evidence law, we started talking about introduction of digital evidence after how many years of digitization across all jurisdictions. So this makes law and social change much more important because it's similar to what if a car manufacturer has a concept car and he says, I've designed this car to be used in 15 years time, in 10 years time, in 5 years time, which means that you have a legal system that's already doing its critical thinking in respect of certain aspects of our law or of our society. So because of that, free will is very important as an example to show you how to ask questions and how to resolve those questions. And some of those questions may not be resolved, but it's important to keep it in the minds of academics and jurists that there is a problem that requires resolution. And secondly, it's also important for you in terms of having referencing to specific types of critical thinking. When I started this, I said this was very important to our understanding of the realist school and also the sociological school in terms of how law interacts with society. So that's also very important because of that multidisciplinary nature of the subject that we are about to discuss. So for today, we'll be talking about free will. When we talk about free will, can someone first of all help me define what he thinks free will is? What is free will?
The ability for somebody to act according to his own discretion.
According to his own discretions and independently of any other causative factors. I just added that for clarity, but I think your definition is fantastic. Any other definition? Any other definition?
Yes, sir. I think that free will is the liberty a person has to do as he so pleases, irrespective of any influence.
Irrespective of any influence. I think that's very important.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Sorry, what does Oyinye mean?
Oyinye means gift.
Gift. Okay, okay.
Yes, sir.
I had a neighbor that had that name. I love the name, but I never could ask what it meant. Okay, any other definition? Fatima, you want to give us one? Or Victoria?
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. How are you?
Fine, sir. Sir, I feel free will is the freedom of humans to make choices that are not determined by like a prior cause or by divine intervention.
Okay, we are bringing divinity into it now. And I think, you know, why this is important is because all these definitions matter. Why? Because we are talking about a subject that will touch on something as basic as biology. It will talk on metaphysics, it will touch on sociology, psychology, psychiatry, religion, things like law and morality that I think you did with Professor Egbeole in the first semester, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
Bashirat,
Yes, sir.
I see you. Go ahead.
I feel free will is the power or the authority an individual as a human has to choose to perform an act or not to do it, or to choose between alternative of an act independent of laws or social norms or custom or even religion or any sort of restraints.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, with all the definitions that we are having, it shows clearly that there are certain elements to free will. Number one is you must be an agent, which means you are an agent of yourself. You are independent of any coaxing or pushing or poking by any other element, even a divine element. So we basically come to something of a working conclusion that free will means freedom, independence, being using your own facilities and your own faculties to reach decisions. Now the question is this: when you reach decisions, how many of you believe fully that you are reaching decisions based on your faculties? How many of you can say that 100% of the time he is exercising free will?
I can't say, sir.
You can't say that.
Oh, no,
Yes,
sir, we are not.
because at times, even when we decide to do something, there's always a prior thing that would influence it. Like, okay, this is why I'm making this decision. So there's always something that in a way influence our decision making.
And that thing may be what? What do you think?
And it could even be the effect that I don't want other people to like fault my own actual decision. So like influence from other people, like, okay, what would they say if I do this? So why not just
Do it this or that
like
way?
this other way? Yes, sir.
Okay. Farida.
Okay, good morning, sir. I wanted to say that I feel like we never really have free will because most of the decisions and choices that we make are dependent on some factors, whether religious factors, cultural factors, or even moral standards.
Okay. Okay. Any other person? Are there no males in this class?
We don't usually know what is to happen to them, sir.
I hope they are not in the bush trying to kidnap somebody.
We are just giving them.
You know, we just want women. We are trying to make room for equality.
We are trying to do what?
Can you imagine?
That's why we decide to be quiet. We are being gender inclusive.
Ladies first.
That's the most sexist thing I've had this morning.
As in sexism, sir.
There's no such thing as ladies first or ladies second. Everybody's equal. Okay, Shukru Lawi.
Good morning, sir. This is Adioti Daniel.
Okay, go on.
All right. For free will, well, from the various anime I've seen, I think in a way the fact that you get to choose between alternative in itself is free will. So the fact that you get to, because there are certain factors and you can still work within those factors, shows that in a way, free will is still operable. Free will may not necessarily be in totality. It might not be you just do whatsoever you want, but the fact that you are able to work with alternative means that there is an element of free will. So if you want to consider religion before you make a decision, the fact that you are able to consider those religion standards means that there is actually a free thinking on your own part to decide to factor it into your thinking. The same can also be said with respect of laws. Maybe, for instance, I want to steal. The fact that I might want to consider the laws before I steal means that there's a free will for me to consider it. And if I like, I might still end up stealing. It is still free will. So I feel free will is operatable in the fact that there is an option to do it. So whether or not you do it or otherwise, whether or not you decide to think about the factors, the fact that you can even think about the factors that are in operation and all means that in a way, free will is always in man, but it is for less for him to now decide what to do with it. Either wants to take it into action or not. It is always there. Thank you.
Okay, Daniel. I saw you raising up.
Yes, sir. Sir?
Daniel, go on. I saw you
Yes,
raising up your hand.
Yeah, I just talk now. I was talking,
No,
sir.
there's another, is it David or Daniel I saw? He's disappeared from my screen now. Okay.
Okay, so I was going to say
David,
some of the things Daniel, yes, I was going to say some of the things Daniel mentioned. Then again, I think genes and our chromosomes also affect some of our decisions. Like for instance, our parents or grandparents might have been in a certain line of business somewhat, and due to some of the things they've done in the past, it's kind of like how do I put it? There's this genetic imprinting. It's kind of imprints on their genes and it passes down to their offsprings. And in so doing, they tend to do some of the things that what's the name? Some of the things their ancestors did in the past. So in what I say is that even genes actually influence decision making. So free will is kind of non-existence in our daily living and so.
Okay, okay. Onye,
Okay, sir. I was about to say what Shafe said. I was going to reply Daniel in saying that free will, from the definitions that we discussed earlier, free will is independent of influences. So far there is the limitation of an influence, then it's no longer free will. You have to abide by it, or you have to in fact reason or align your thinking or your decisions towards that limitation of an influence. So my point is that I do not believe that there is anything called free will, sir.
thank you. Abdulmajid.
Yes, sir. In response to what you said, I disagree I disagree in entirety because I want to agree, I want to align myself with what Daniel said. The fact that there is an influence does not mean the fact that we have a lot of factors to consider before making a decision does not make such a decision devoid of free will. Because just like Daniel said, even if you are considering religious laws, even if you are considering the punishment or the stigma that would flow from your decision in the society, the fact that you have the option to either do or not to do, that is the free will that is there. Because if you are considering religious laws, there is nobody to, if you don't do it, okay, religious saying you should not do this, you should not do that. If you do it, nobody would hold you accountable for now. Like there are some of those things that nobody will hold you accountable for. And whether or not, if you do them, if you do I don't know, I'm mixing things up. But what I'm trying to say is that the fact that there are factors or conditions that influence your decision does not make them devoid of free will, because you can choose to do or not to do. The availability of choice there is what brings about free will, just like Daniel said.
Okay. Shukuru Ilawi.
Yes, I can hear me, sir.
I can hear you clearly.
Whether there is a free will or not is not actually my. But I want to believe that there is liberty. And from that liberty, we have materialism. From that angle, the libertarians have come up with two major arguments. The first one is the argument of determination, and the second one is the argument of moral responsibility. Yes, sir. To sum it up, both the arguments are Police Lamont has nicely summed it up. He said, and I read, there is the unmistakable institution of virtually every human being, that he is free to make the choice he does, and that the deliberation leading to those choices are also free flowing. The normal man feels too, after he has made a decision, that he could have decided differently. That is why regret or remorse for a past choice can be so disturbing. That is my position.
Okay. Thank you very much. Now let's try to proceed. I know some people are still raising up their hands, but we'll be doing that as we go along. So let's try to proceed with some of the inquiries that I think we want to make for this next 1 hour or 1.5 hours or so. Now, when we talk about free will, it's clear that some of you think you have free will, some of you think you do not have. And that's important for this discussion, because we don't want our discussion to be a settled discussion where we all agree on the same thing, because that stops further inquiry. Now, when we talk about free will, part of the multidisciplinary nature of free will tells us clearly that it is more based on sociological thinking rather than anything else, because of the information we are going to be using, even for this class, information that will come from areas such as religion, such as morality, the sciences, and all that. Now, part of this is because the reason we are going into free will is because free will also has a relationship with the law. And the question is, where does it have a relationship with the law? When we look at our law of tort, our criminal law, and other aspects of our laws, we see certain words that are used to qualify culpability. If you are culpable, these are some of the conditions that will qualify culpability. What level did you do criminal law?
300 levels,
levels, sir.
Okay, I hope you still have some of that memory of specific things that will say if somebody dishonestly does so and so, if someone willingly does so and so. Now, all those kinds of things have free will contents. Now, free will,
yes, sir.
Initially, in a criminal law, there was a merger of both criminal and civil law where everything appeared to be strict liability. Nobody was interested in what your mens rea was. And it was later, I think around the 13th century or so, with the when religion was becoming more important, that legal systems were beginning to look for a better way to represent their law by having fault elements into it, which is where we started talking seriously about things like actus reus and mens rea, where your action has to be relatable to your intention, your mind, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
And we found out that now, because of that change in terms of how the law looked at law, from having just strict liability content to now wanting to attach intention to culpability and so on. Again, the discussions over free will or a lack of free will became absolutely important. But so that we don't deviate too much, I'm going to try to present the slides that you already have so that we can focus on what we need to discuss. Because this is an absolutely large area of discussion, and it's important that we have a scope that's very narrow and specific to law. Now, I hope you are seeing it.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, John Locke said something, and he said, and I'll read it out to you. He said, according to Locke, we're having a problem with someone. Could you switch off your mic? Okay. Now, John Locke said the epithet free will was improper speech and that it meant nothing. It was, when you say free will, free in itself was a qualifier for will. And he said that doesn't make any sense, because it's either you have will or you don't have will, that there's nothing called free will. That is like asking whether a man's speed is round or juicy or something, and that they do not qualify each other. And he says whether man's will be free or not, the question is, it's altogether in itself improper. Okay? That the question is in itself improper, and it is insignificant. It is as insignificant to ask whether a man's will be free as to ask whether his sleep is swift or his virtue square. Liberty being as little applicable to the will as swiftness of motion is to sleep, or squareness to virtue. Everyone will laugh at the absurdity of such a question as either of these, because it is clear that the modification of the motion belongs not to sleep, nor to the difference of figure to virtue. When one considers it, he will as plainly perceive that liberty, which is but a power, belongs only to agents and cannot be an attribute or modification of the will, which is also but a power. Who can explain this? Are we together?
Yes, sir.
You had my slides for 2 weeks. I'm sure when you saw this, some thoughts went through your mind. Now, basically, the point is saying, and I hope I'm still with you. I need proof of life. Let someone say I'm still with you.
Yes, sir.
Yes, still with us.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, when he says this, what he basically means is that there are two words, free, will. The two words are independent of each other. One cannot act as a qualifier of the other because free means free. Will means will. So when you say free will is an improper word to use as a qualifier for will.
Sir, cannot.
Go on. Okay, I'll continue. That free cannot be a qualifier for will. In the same manner, will cannot.
That basically everyone has liberty, Abby. I think.
Hello.
Hi, sir.
Okay, my network went off. I'm back now. So we can.
Yeah, we're already proceeding with the class.
Let me try and share the slide again.
Okay, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the point Locke was making was you can't have free as a qualifier for will. Why? Because there are two unrelated and independent words. And that when you use free, free is a word on its own. Will is a word on its own. Whether something is free or not is free. Will means will. If something makes you act differently, then it's not will anymore. It's something else. And that was his own basic reasoning. Now, there are certain questions. We have started with what is free will, and we had definitions from you. We also had whether you had free will or not. Some people said they had free will, and some said they did not have free will. So obviously, we are in some kind of halfway house where we've not been able to resolve anything yet. And if at the end of the day, we still do not resolve anything, then I'll be very happy because it means we are working very hard at resolving nothing. Now, the third one is, and someone mentioned it, to what extent do you have free will? To what extent do you have free will? And these are discussions that have been had in sociology, in religion, and all that. Because when we talk about particularly religion, a lot of the religions talk in terms of determinism, which is basically to the effect that there's a conclusion. The day you were born, what you will be is already known. When you will die, when you will marry, what your behavior will be like. There's someone who also talked about genes and all that from the past, what your gene imprinting by the behavior of your ancestors and all that. And we put all that into this cold run of issues for discussion. But an important question is, to what extent do you have free will? And when we talk about will, where does will come from? Is it something that comes from the mind? Does it come from the brain, the biological brain? Or does it come from the metaphysical soul? Where does free will come from?
The mind.
What is the mind?
A combination of the three.
I feel, sir. I think that free will comes from a man's seat of consciousness. That is his mind, or quote and unquote his soul.
Mind. So you think mind and soul are the same thing?
Yes, sir.
Why
No,
do
sir.
people believe that someone's soul will roast in a hellfire and not his mind?
Sir, okay, so from like I would say the Christian perspective and Christian books and things like that, when we talk about the soul or when we say soul, we usually mean the mind, the emotion, the will, and the desires, like all those things. These four compartments are believed to make up what we call the soul, just from this perspective. So free will could come from the soul. So we believe that this mind is not independent of the soul, but the mind is a compartment of the soul.
The mind is a compartment of the soul. Then where does the brain come from? Where does it lie in that equation?
Body, physical.
The brain is physical.
Even though its processes could be influenced by the mind. So when you have by the soul generally. So when you have things like emotions, things like desires and things like that, they all have physical reactions of such in your brain. So depending on like hormones and things like that. So even emotional pain can be seen through certain study of the brain. So I feel that's why, for instance, in psychology, they will study your brain in line with your emotional states in a way. Doesn't make sense. I don't know if I'm making sense.
Don't worry.
Kojapa, you're making sense.
You are making a lot of senseless sense. That's why we are here, really. And that's the beauty of this discussion we are having. Yeah, go on.
The concept of senseless sense now, I see it in the asking of the question, what is free will? Because still ruminating on John Locke's statement, it now makes the question very, very redundant. What is free will? And do we have free will? Like, the question now seems absurd from starting with that particular statement of John Locke. It now makes no sense anymore.
What John Locke is saying is it should be what is will.
Exactly. So if there is anything like, so if there's anything like a question, to what extent do you have free will? Then it is it's absurd to ask to what extent do you have free will, if whether you have will or not. So it's either you have will or you don't have will. Then that means to what extent do you have free will? It's a very absurd question.
Well, I mean, I would like
ingenious way of avoiding answering that question.
I'm not a fashion.
Okay.
Oh.
Now we've also Abdul Majid.
Hi, sir. I personally believe free will comes from the mind, because I think your mind, like let's say, the ability or mental awareness to make decisions. Like whatever decision you want to make comes from the mind. The soul, on the other hand, is just your life generally, like the spirit, the life in you. That's the soul, and brain is like maybe it works with the what do you call it? The mind, but it's like maybe let's say maybe the executive in this instance implementing decisions like control all part of your body. But I think mind is where the decisions are made. So I think free will comes from the mind.
Okay, Bashirat.
Was I would say free will comes from the soul. The mind basically is just where we have where our rational thoughts comes from as a human being. But then the soul is it encompasses the mind, because the soul is a combination of our personality, of our emotions, and all of that. And there's no way we can make decision, even if we are making decision with our mind, with our rational thoughts. There's still that influence of our perception, our emotion. We give preference to certain things based on our genetics. So I think it's our free will comes from the soul more than it comes from our mind. Give that.
Okay. Now, so that we can proceed. Can we all agree that we don't understand what we are saying?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, sort of.
Okay, let's start from there and then let's see how we go on. Because our specific remit this morning is its relationship with criminal law. So let's go on to the next one. Now, one of the things, when we talk about the issues with free will, we talked about when mens rea started becoming a part of criminal law, people start thinking in terms of things like, okay, there should be a false element to some types of crimes. They call them serious crimes or felonies, for example, that there should be some kind of false element to it. And that probably started with an interaction between law and religion, which became much more important over time. Now, in trying to find a false element, free will became constant in terms of that discussion. And the initial punishment theory, again, was retribution, right? There are different types of punishment theories. Retribution is one, which is an eye for an eye thing. You did so, and so. We will have retribution by also punishing you. If it's in a like fashion, fantastic. If we can even punish you more, all the better. And then there are also other aspects of punishment theory, such as deterrence, rehabilitation, and education, and all that. And there's also what you call disablement. For example, somebody who has a communicable disease and refuses to stay in his house can be quarantined and kept somewhere. That is how you disable him, because you disable him from spreading the disease. Now, all these happen. And then when you start looking at the issue of free will and the type of punishment that convicts are more likely to have, you can find a relationship again in terms of, if this is free will, what punishment is best. If this person acted willfully, what punishment is best suitable for such a person? Now, Oliver Holmes, how many of you remember Oliver Holmes?
I do, sir.
One of the shining lights of the realist school, right?
Yes, sir.
And he says here, if I were having a philosophical talk with a man I was going to have hanged or electrocuted, I will say, I don't doubt that your act was inevitable for you. But to make it more avoidable by others, we propose to sacrifice you to the common good. You may regard yourself as a soldier dying for his country if you like, but the law must keep its promise. Now, this statement has many elements. It shows the law's reluctance to widen the scope of culpability or to inquire into what culpability means. It shows the law's enthronement of retribution and deterrence as punishment theories. And it shows basically the sacrifice of otherwise innocent people who may not have the proper faculties to appreciate what they have done. And it became more important for the law to punish even such people in terms of stabilizing the law. Obviously, in the United States, we have seen historically 13, 14-year-old people who were sentenced to death and electrocuted. That's in the United States. And I dare say there are a lot of countries that have done more or less the same thing. Now, as time progresses, we have seen differences. Across Europe now, you can hardly apply for the European Union membership and be carrying out death sentences in your country. And there are certain fundamentals also, for relationships with other nations that have come into being. Now, the importance of this discussion is to understand from the beginning whether law itself understands the notion of what comes to constitute mens rea, or what you can call a criminal mind in respect of criminal or tortious infractions. I hope we are getting it.
Yes, sir.
Okay, now there's free will's relationship with criminal law and tortious liability, and we've said in your criminal law, for example, what section deals with murder? What section of the penal code deals with murder? Or I think it calls it homicide. Hello, you started forgetting, you've forgotten criminal law entirely. Are we still together?
We are together, sir. We are trying to
Yes,
remember.
Okay,
But
why you
penal
are trying to...
It's section 300 and something.
Okay, why you are trying to
313 or
do
so.
all that? We have seen, and I'm sure you must have had some of that discussion, that when you talk about culpability in criminal law, for example, some of the things that can make you avoid culpability will be, say, mistake of fact, obviously with some sundry conditions, intoxication as well with some sundry conditions, provocation with some sundry conditions too. Now, under the penal code, intoxication will act as part defense to certain things. But there, under the Criminal Code Act, you will find out that intoxication, it's clear that if you are intoxicated, it doesn't act, the reason it may not act as a defense to you is that that intoxication must have been caused by another. And when it was, you were intoxicated unknowingly by somebody else, number one, that you do not know that what you were doing. Two, you did not know the right or wrong of what you were doing. And or that intoxication caused temporary insanity. Okay, now the penal code is a little more, I think, expansive in terms of that. But when you also talk about something like provocation, for example, provocation talks about anger in the passion, anger that happens in a heated
In the heat
moment.
of passion.
In the heat of passion, thank you. So if the anger happened in the heat of passion, it also means that you did not have time for deliberation, right? If you did not have time for deliberation, it means you acted in the heat of passion. As I'm sitting down, and most women will know that one of the things you can use to beat down a man is to tell a man that he's impotent. If somebody were to tell me right now that I'm impotent, in the heat of passion, I take a machete and machete the person to death, I will probably have a part defense or a mitigation of my culpability by moving murder to, it can move murder down to, it can downgrade it to manslaughter.
Manslaughter.
Because that is basically what provocation does. But now my question is this: what makes the man who acts in the heat of, why do we think that if he doesn't have time to deliberate, he's somehow less culpable than someone who was provoked, he went home, and each time he was thinking about it, his anger aggravated to the point where he killed someone? Why is the other man somehow giving some kind of excuse and this person is not giving any excuse? That's the question. Now, the second question is, why does A act in the heat of passion, and why does B think about it, and thinking about it aggravates his own passion? Could it just be simple biology? And when I mean could this just be simple biology, does it mean that we human beings are hardwired to behave in different ways? Your perspective is important here.
For the first question, I think the reason why the law gives lesser punishment to the person who was provoked compared to the person who had time to think it over is because the person who went back home to think over the whole thing before retaliating or doing whatever he did, he had the time to choose between, he had the time to deliberate on the consequence of his action before he decided to go and retaliate, compared to somebody that acted based on like say the impulse or based on, I don't know what word to qualify it, but I don't know.
Based on some kind of incremental anger, right?
Yeah, something like that. So I think that's the reason why the law kind of gives a lesser punishment, that probably in the consideration that humans tend to act in a way, I don't know how to really express the thought. It's in my head, but I don't know how to express it. Maybe someone can help me out if you understand what I'm trying to say.
Okay, Bashirat.
So I think when we talk about free will, it has to do with the capacity to choose. So the first scenario talks about like the person is in the heat of passion. He doesn't have that capacity to choose at that moment. But the second person that went home to think about it, to deliberate on it, he has that capacity to think. He has a time frame to actually rationally think about what he's going to do. But a person in the heat of passion does not have that capacity. He doesn't have that power. So I feel like that's the major difference.
Thank you. That's probably the major difference. But I say this from a personal experience. Now, if you see me on the streets and you insult me, I'm likely to be very cool-headed and just think it over. When I get angry is when I get home and think about it again. And I'm not thinking about the law this time. I'm thinking more in terms of, and this man just disgraced me and embarrassed me. He just did this, he just did that. And the anger increases. The law protects to some level the other man, but doesn't protect me if I now act on that anger. But perhaps even more importantly is, why do I function in this manner and the other man functions in that manner? Because I think some of these things are the reason why we are having these discussions. I do not think the law properly understands human behavior. And if it understands it, when you look at what Oliver Wendell Holmes says, I think the law is deliberately digging his head into the sand, trying not to appear to understand it, so that there can be stability in terms of how the law is represented by the judicial system. Now, there are two things we'll discuss now. The first one is religion, and I even feel funny saying free will again. Let's say religion and will. And the second one is science and will. When we talk about, we've said that there are some words, obviously, that in our legal system, in our statutes, the Criminal Code Act, the Penal Code, and some of the, obviously, you understand that in the North, there have been a graduation from the Penal Code by many states who have amended their penal codes now. Some have some aspects of Sharia incorporated into the penal codes and all that. So particularly in the North doesn't necessarily have just one penal code like in the old days anymore. But you are going to see words like when somebody knowingly connotes some level of will. When someone talks about negligently. I hope we're still together.
Yes, sir.
Okay. when somebody talks about negligently, if you see twins that are born together, you will notice perhaps sometimes that one is an introvert, one is an extrovert. One behaves carelessly, the other one has this well thought out thing for almost everything they do. And they share 99.999% of their DNA, which is exactly the same. And then you find almost without, only on very rare cases will you see twins having exactly the same type of behavior. In terms of whether one is an extrovert, you will hardly find both of them being extroverts or both of them being extroverts. One person is likely to be an introvert and the other person is likely to be an extrovert, and they share more or less the same biology. Or they say someone does something intentionally. Can you intend certain things? We talk again about the sciences. Somebody was talking about psychology then. And if you talk about psychology and psychiatry, we all know that there are different levels of, there are different manifestations of insanity. Somebody can be a sociopath. It means he's a negative person. He has no love or whatsoever for society. He hates society. He will do anything to destroy. And this is seen in both medical and psychological terms. You can see someone else who is a psychopath. So you have all kinds of medical or psychiatrical phrases that people have for certain behaviors that in Africa here, most of us may just think of as a quack. Somebody is weird, he's this, he's that. But there are things to show that these are medical conditions and positions that different people have. Now, if you talk about something being voluntary, did you do it voluntarily or not? Again, that there's a will element to it in terms of voluntariness. As a law student, if you're at a post office, for example, your behavior will be markedly different from the conductor who is chauffeuring a bus. In terms of your level of thinking, your level of deliberation before you act. Am I right or wrong?
Yes, sir.
You're right, sir.
Now, the question is, from day one, there are different things that we need to consider here. Number one is the science, the biology. Are we wired differently from day one by genetic, our genetic things? Why is it that there are some specific species of dogs that are called more intelligent than other dogs? Why are some human beings more intelligent than other human beings? Why are some families just gentle and quiet, gentlemanly people, while some families tend to be very aggressive and violent? All these are questions that the law basically ignores. Now, Caribbean White in Asanya versus State, and why I said the law ignores it is, number one, either the law ignores it, two, the law is not aware of it, or three, the law just thinks it is safe to play the ostrich and stick to traditional methods of adjudication. Now, Caribbean White, Asanya's case, someone took a machete and killed his wife because his wife, he demanded sex from his wife and his wife rejected him. And he said he did not know how it happened, that maybe it was medicine or something. This is Caribbean White's reaction to that. He said the nearest meaning of the construction of his expression, I think the thing did not happen by empty hand, whether it is medicine, is that the incident to him is rationally inexplicable. Thus, the written statement that the conduct of the appellant was rationally inexplicable and his subsequent oral testimony in his own defense at his trial that he was at the time of the commission of the offense insane or mad cannot be anything but inconsistent. It seems to me that the two are mutually repugnant and contradictory, and both cannot stand. Both cannot obviously be relied upon, since the subsequent statement infers the falsity of the earlier. The inconsistencies lies in his knowledge and awareness of how the deceased came to her death. Any comments on this? Especially as it relates to whether there is an inconsistency in what the accused person, in what the appellant said.
Well, I think this term rationally inexplicable, like the first part is talking about it being rationally inexplicable. It means he's not insane, no, but he just cannot explain what happened. And then he goes ahead to plead insanity, which is why I think the justice is saying that the two positions are like contradictory in terms of determining knowledge and awareness of the way the wife died.
Do you think they are contradictory?
Well, rationally inexplicable implies there is rationality, but it is not explainable. But insanity means like you don't really have the appropriate faculties to think rationally, but it happened. Or you may know what you are doing at the time, but it's just that what you are doing is premised on generally irrational circumstances. Oh God, who created jurisprudence? My head has finished.
That's the point we are getting at. Hopefully everybody's head will be finished when we finish the next 1 hour. Now, what he's saying is, now, let's make one thing clear. Rationally inexplicable is Justice Karibiwai's words. Those are his words, not the accused person's words. The accused person's words are, I think the thing did not happen by empty hand. So just for clarification, that is what the accused said. The judge was the one who qualified that statement by saying it was rational, that what the accused was saying was that it was rationally inexplicable. Now, if you relate, I think this did not happen by empty hand, to insanity, I personally do not see an inconsistency there. What I see is someone saying, I did not understand how this event came into being. So if, for example, I use insanity as a defense, I think that whether the court allows that, whether the court says I'm insane or not is a different issue entirely. But when I say I was insane, I think it would be bogus of anybody to tell me that I think this thing happens by, I think this thing did not happen by empty hand, is inconsistent with insanity. Any comments?
No, sir.
Okay, some of us are still trying to recollect that.
But are there not standards for insanity? Like, doesn't the law have like an insane person? Okay, it's not easy to determine when you look at some psychological other factors, or if you call it psychiatrist or something like that. But I feel when you say insanity, it refers to some kind of illness. But in that particular point, it was actually rationally inexplicable. He just did not understand how it happened.
He did not understand. And to me, what is important is that you do not understand how it happened, right?
So anybody that does not
let's
understand
go back to our law basically is some kind of variation of the McNaughton rule. And the McNaughton rule relating to when insanity, for example, can come as a, you can use it as a defense, is to the effect that you did not know the right or wrong of what you were doing. Very simple, one sentence qualification for insanity. Now, those are the issues that we are discussing now. Insanity does not, the legal qualification of insanity is not interested in whether somebody is a sociopath, whether you are a psychopath, whether you have this or you have that, or whatever. The only thing it is interested in is that you do not know the right or wrong of what you are doing. So if you kill someone, for example, and you try to hide the body, the law will term you as being very sane. If you kill someone and you try to run away, the law will treat you as being sane because it treats you as knowing the right or wrong of what you have done. Thereof, the reason you are trying to escape. So the law only has insanity defenses. The law as presently constituted in Nigeria only has insanity defenses for someone who is an out and out mad person. I hope you are with me.
My point exactly, sir. An out and out mad person.
That's what
Like a crazy ass person.
That's what the law is interested in. But our discussion now is a concept discussion, which is why it is in law and social change. Should that be what the law is interested in? If, for example, section 5 of our Evidence Act says things that are causative factors can be introduced to give evidence to change the mind of the judge.
Well, I think the causative factor, I think the reason why maybe insanity definitions are streamlined or why they should be streamlined is because many people can now take advantage of that particular distance to escape the law or the workings of the law. So anybody can just come and say, I don't know how it happened. And if the law always now holds that just because a person said, I don't know how it happens, without any lines or without any strict definition of what insanity is, then it means anybody that doesn't know how to explain, anybody that is provoked may not know how it happened, but it doesn't mean the person is insane. So I feel that it is not too bad of the law to hold insanity in strict terms because it might now be exploitable. But then the law has also created caveats, as you've mentioned, things that are maybe the occasion, cause, or effects. But that would now be another line of defense rather than insanity itself. Because, yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, I'm still there. If I confuse myself further.
I think what you just said is absolutely brilliant, which is insanity is one thing. Cause or effect for an event is a different matter entirely. But at the end of the day, if insanity is the only defense that the penal code, for example, or the criminal code comes with as a defense to a particular act, then all the cause or effect will still end up being stymied by whether this person is insane or not. It can assist in other areas where insanity or whatever, you're not talking about murder or homicide and all that, but particularly for murder or homicide, it becomes a very important issue. Now, when we look at the science of this, we will realize how important it is in terms of how the law looks at some of these things. But there are issues like nature-nurture arguments. And the question is this: why are people from divorced homes more likely to be divorced in later years? Is it nature? Is it nurture? Why did they study in the US and correctional in the US correctional system state that most of the violent criminals there have different brain scans to your regular people on the street who have not committed violence? And that those brain scans show less activity in the frontal lobe of the brain, which is the part of the brain that basically deals with processing information. I hope we are still together.
Yes, sir.
So the point we're making here is if somebody somehow has, now the frontal lobe of the brain, like we talked about, is easily relatable to people who commit violent crimes. Like the provocation thing we're talking about, people acting in a red hot anger and behaving and misbehaving and all that. Now, when you look at the scans, you find that when they are told to look at something, they are supposed to process information. If you look at the scans, the average person has better activity around that area when trying to process information than these people. So the question is this: are they reacting out of frustration in violence because they cannot process information as quickly as they require to process information to make a reasonable decision? Now, that is biology. We talk about the environment too. If you come from an environment where, for example, violence is not seen as something that shows weakness, that violence is seen as something that shows strength. I remember my grandfather used to tell me a story when we were children. Maybe I'm talking about, maybe I was 5, 6, 7 at the time, where, because for some funny reason in my family, people tend to just give birth to sons rather than daughters. Everybody in my family, from my grandfather will have like about 15 children. Only 1 or 2 will be female. All his children will have, like, some will have 5 children. In my own case, 5 children at the time, only 1 female. Right now, as you're looking at me, I have 3 sons, no female. But in the old days, he used to crack this joke that one of the things he used to do with his neighbors was, each time there was a fight, each time they had an argument or something, and I'm talking about the old days when all of them were farmers, he would just send his sons into the neighbor's farmland to beat up everybody there. You know? So now my question is, there you were seeing violence as a sign of strength. If somebody were to come up from that kind of upbringing, how do you think his relationship with violence will be? Obviously, you can introduce this under the Section 5 of the Evidence Act, but whether a judge thinks of it as being important or not is the real issue, because you can say any nonsense you want. The judge will just look at it and say, no, I'm not paying any regard to this particular thing. So there are nature-nurture arguments, and those nature-nurture arguments have traversed other areas outside of even this discussion that we are having. The nature-nurture argument was one of the bases for the arguments for same-sex marriage. If it is nature, then I'm being discriminated against because that's my nature. If it is not my nature, then we can have another argument relating to nurture. I hope we understand. And this same argument is what we are having in terms of our criminal laws relationship with free will. Now, then again, there's something, you also talk about determinism and indeterminism. And this also goes across religions. For example, in the holy books, you will read things about God has made some people slaves for so and so years. That there will be 7 lean years and 7 years of fat. I hope we are getting this.
Yes.
That no drop of leaf falls from the tree without the knowledge of the Almighty. That before you were born, what you are going to be, when you are going to die, everything has already been written in a book. Who can give us more? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Go on.
Maybe some God of the poor and the God of the rich.
God of the poor, God of the rich. So religion tells you basically that there are issues that go well beyond your understanding. And hence the whole idea of what? Do not judge, right? You do not
Yes,
understand.
sir. Yes, sir.
You do not understand this. Do not judge. We have done this. We have done this. We have closed in the Quran, for example. You will find some verses where it will be said that some people's eyes have been closed to faith. But in the other hand, it talks about them having chosen damnation. And because they have chosen damnation, we have allowed them to be led towards damnation. I hope we are understanding some of this. So the question is, how responsible are we for our actions? Because if there has been some kind of determination as to what I'll be, for example, then am I not? There was a day somebody looked at me and we were having a conversation, and he was talking about that when I talk to you, lawyer, in fact, you always try to have a smile on your face and all that stuff. And I had to go back home and deliberate on that do I always have a smile on my face? I did not even think of it in terms of an effort putting a smile on my face. And another person can see another lawyer who always has a frown on his face, and he may not tell him because he's afraid of receiving a punch from that person. But the question will be, why does this guy always have a frown on his face? Is this something he willed? Or is he just determined that that is the way he will be? Can we have some comments?
Yes, sir. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm fine, sir. So, yes, sir, I want to look at it from two angles. So the first is, as you have explained, that religion made us understand that God has created us in a particular way, and also He has ordained certain things that will be done by us. So, and I want to look at it from the light of what is referred to as qadar, that is predestination in Islam. So that is, before we come to the world, we all have what we are going to do. And then there was this popular story I said about someone who actually stole during the time of one of the caliphs. And when he stole, he was asked why he stole. He said because he has been destined to steal. And the caliph said, okay, if you have been predestined to steal, we are also going to cut your hand as a predestination for what you did. So it goes down to the fact that, fine, God has created us and He has written down what we're going to do. But however, the issue of free will also come in here because He created us with instinct. And somehow in a verse of the Quran also, He said that after creating man, He guided him towards two things, that is making options between two things, between what is right and what is wrong. So that goes down to the fact that, or to the second side of what I want to say, that fine, even if God has predestined some things for us to do and for some things to happen to us, He as well gave us that instinct to identify what is good or bad. So if we are on a path and from our instinct, we are able to identify that this is not favorable to us, we have the option of actually switching. Or if it is coming from an external force, we have the instinct to actually examine, just as you said now, what somebody commented about you. You went back home and then you thought about it. So then we go back and we look at it and say, okay, is this in the right thing? So from two sides, the first one, that is predestination of whatever we do, is on one side. And the second thing is the instinct of making a choice between two things. So, and on the final part to it, that what we understand that, okay, as Muslims, that these things, does it change? Okay, what God has ordained, does it change? Yes, we believe that sometimes it changes when we seek guidance, when we supplicate, and on some special occasions actually change. So those are the three angles I want to look at it from. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very, very, very much. Now, a lot of times we find that religion makes up for some of these confusion, right? When we talked about, okay, the general biblical something that says, do not judge, it's making up for that confusion. Again, in the Quran, some of the things you have said basically is making up for the confusion that you may have. And in the Quran, it basically says everything that befalls you is a test. I hope I'm right.
You're on point, sir. Yeah, yes, sir.
So if everything that befalls you is a test, it means we have given you something that may appear as a predilection to doing a particular thing, but it is a test because we have also given you the book to read to know what is right and what is wrong. Some people will have bigger tests and some may have smaller tests. And how religion solves that problem is by saying that you do not know. Only God knows. Okay, so all those things. Now, some of these things are things that some people will want law to take cognizance of. Take a look at it, assess it, and come to a decision as to how the law should walk its path. Because we also look at, we've talked that there are some people that believe that you are the sole agent of whatever you do. You have absolute free will. You decide what you do. There is nothing that affects you in any way. And then you have, again, determinism, which is more from a religious point in terms of everything has been predicted. Everything has been determined. This is what you do, this is what you do, this is what you do. So we have these arguments there. And then we also have things like mechanics and the law. There are some diseases where when you talk about the issue of menstrual, whether somebody thinks about it, whether there's a connection, there are some people who do things that are not connected to their intentions. And there are some physical diseases such as Tourette's diseases, for example, where people's hands will move, no connection to it whatsoever. Twitching of the faces and things like that. You've got things like Down's syndrome that affects people in different manners. Now, some of the things we talked about in respect of menstrual, we said menstrual came to be something that was important, I think, around the 13th century or so. Basically, and it became even much more important in the early part of the 17th century, where we started having a lot of laws coming up, particularly in Britain, that had specific fault elements. And those fault elements were supposed to be a reaction to laws that were mala in se. That is, laws that were that were not just wrong, but were thought of as being evil. Laws that were not just thought wrong in terms of law, in terms of interpretations of statutes, but were thought of as inherently immoral or evil. So for those types of laws, such as murder, theft, and things like that, you started seeing some fault elements being incorporated into the drafting of the penal sections. Now, mala prohibitatum were basically laws that they were just wrong because the statutes say they are wrong, not because there's any other specific connotation to it. So because of that, the mental elements, the will elements of those laws in drafting never came into any particular prominence. I hope we are still together.
Yes, sir, we are.
Okay, so when we say there's free will, there are also other things that we want to talk about. Okay, in Islam, for example, there are two angels that were called honorable scribes, Rakib and Atid. And these two were supposedly the two angels that recorded everything that you did, both good and bad things. You may want to read about them and then try to figure out by yourself how this relates to this discussion. Then there is also Islamic mythical thoughts about two other angels, Harut and Marut, that were sent to earth, when they questioned God in terms of the free will of man, they were sent to earth, and their objective was to create as much disharmony and to test man's will. And for people like me who I talk to myself all the time, and my children think I have some level of mental instability. How many people talk to themselves?
I do, sir.
I do, sir.
Yes, sir.
Many of us are mad people.
And the way of saying,
We have many mad people in the class. That was nice to know. Now, don't you feel sometimes that...
Nice to meet you, sir.
Nice to meet you too. Now, don't you feel that each time you make decisions or something comes up to you, you develop some kind of multiple personality that appear to be questioning each other and be asking each other questions? And it's still you.
Yes, yes.
Now, again, I think it's important that you relate that to this discussion. I don't want to say something that basically closes the discussion in terms of whether we are having an inquiry or not. Now, there are also some genetic arguments relating to how these things function. There are both scientific and genetic arguments. Number one is the readiness potential, which has shown that there is an electric charge in the human body fractions of seconds before you make decisions. Now, people don't know whether that is tension in support of wanting to make a decision, or whether that is already a decision being made, an unconscious decision being made before you make a conscious decision. Those arguments are ongoing. There are also gene mutations. Some gene mutations run within families, and studies have shown that there are some specific families that have specific characteristics because of those gene mutations. A particular family was followed, and they found out that they were extremely violent. And there were those gene mutations running through those families. Again, you find out that there are chromosomes that show the normal woman, a female chromosome will be XX. Sometimes you can have females that appear more mannish having a Y chromosome, as a matter of fact. And while the XY chromosome is supposedly for men, you can have really physical and seemingly aggressive men having an extra Y chromosome, which makes it XYY. All these are arguments in terms of things that make up your so-called will. Then you have, again, people who get railroaded into jail because of poverty. And again, you have to ask a question, why is there a correlation between violent crimes and poverty? I'm sure if you go to Madala or somewhere now, most of the criminals that you see that are convicted for criminal offenses are likely to come, for violent offenses, are likely to come from poor backgrounds. Why is there that relationship? Then we've also found out that there are also studies to show that there are specific things relating to DNA. DNA blueprinting, for example, can make breast cancer be predominant in a specific family, right? It can also be, you had people who just go and have a mastectomy when they see too many people having cancer in their families. Now, the question is, can't DNA, this same DNA blueprinting, can't it predispose you to a particular way of thinking? Then there's something called cyanotyping. I want to go through all this, then we can have discussions. There's something called cyanotyping that talks about features of men. When you see people that are educated, there are specific features that they tend to have. I'm talking about physical features. You see people that are considered violent, there may be some specific physical features that they tend to have. And the people that did that study called this cyanotyping. Now, the question again is this. If you are having cyanotyping, isn't it an indication that people can behave in a specific way because of biological and other factors rather than as a process of will? Again, we have seen that brain injuries can predispose people to be violent. Why? Because processing information becomes more difficult. And those types of people may lash out in frustration. And there are doctors that will tell you that if somebody commits so type of crime, I bet if you take a scan of his brain, you find lesions in his brain. Are we still together?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, now if you can say you find lesion, I'll tell you one short story of one of the doctors that conducted this this study about how the brain functions and why there is a preponderance of certain types of people for violent crimes and all that. And he went into this whole, some people are psychopaths, some people are sociopaths, some are this, some are that. Now, if you are a sociopath, the way your brain works is different. If you are a psychopath, for example, again, the way your brain works is different. Most psychopaths will not react to emotion the way you and I will react to emotions. If they react to emotions differently. If I see a dead person in front of me now, trust me, I'll probably break out crying. But a psychopath and a sociopath sees a dead person in front of him. If he sees 1,000 dead bodies in front of him, he may not have any emotion about it. But that doesn't mean he's stupid, he's an out and out mad person. He understands because he has learned from society's understanding of, he has an understanding of emotion from society. He knows if there are 20 people dead in front of him, he's supposed to exclaim and behave like it shocks him and he's in some kind of emotional distress. So he will do that. But not because he feels that emotion. What he's expressing is something that he learned to express. But the big question is, why is this person that way? And why are the rest of society this way? And a lot of people, when we talk about predisposition and predetermination, I'll tell you something. The joke I said I wanted to tell you about a doctor, one of the doctors that carried out this study. He carried out brain scans of people in prison. And while he was carrying out the brain scans, he thought of carrying out his own brain scan too as control. And then somehow all the brain scans got jammed on together. And they were looking at it. And at the end of the day, one of the students that was working with him in that project looked at him and said, "Sir, all these," and he was looking at it and he saw that his own brain scan was among these people. And his brain scan was not in any way different from most of these criminals that they were talking about. And he said he went home and he was discussing with his wife that, do you know that my brain scan was among the brain scans that I discussed with other people in the project today. And there was no difference between how my brain scan reacted to information and how these other people's brain scans reacted to information. And his wife looked at him and said, "Are you just realizing that you're a psychopath and a sociopath?" I hope we are still together.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Maya,
sir.
wanted to say something.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, please.
Yes. I have a question. My question is, I know that there are people that have multiple personality disorder, where they say like 10 people is living in them, and one of the persons living in them committed the crime. How does the court rule in such a case where the person brings up such defense that it wasn't me that is talking now that did it, it was so other person that is inside me that did this thing? I'm sort of curious, like what will happen in that situation?
In that situation, and that is the discussion we are still having across, I think 90-something% of jurisdictions, little or no relevance will be given to that kind of defense. But it's not necessarily a policy, because again, we were talking about Section 5 of evidence, law of evidence, and other jurisdictions. And when people come in and say, I have 3 personalities in me, I have this, I have that, I was not the one that committed this offense, it was. Most lawyers will hardly even encourage a client to come with that to court, because they know that is a very hard hurdle to get past. But our laws of evidence says you can introduce these kinds of evidence, but they are treated by the judges on a case-by-case basis. So as each case, and you find that 90-something% of the time, the people who bring those kinds of evidence will probably be sending their clients to the gallows. I hope that's okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so when this doctor now realized that his brain was also, he had the brain of a psychopath. He didn't have too many emotions and all that stuff. So that is where you have this intermingling of both nurture and nature. The environment can be a causal factor, nature can be a causal factor. And sometimes the environment that you find yourself keeps you away from certain things. Now, if he came from an environment of Harvardians, parents who studied in Harvard, who studied here, who did this, who did that, his training can make him bereft of emotion, which may very well be what you need to be a brain surgeon, to be a successful brain surgeon. It could be that same lack of emotion, that same lack of empathy that you need to be the one that takes the penalties for Chelsea in the final of the Champions League. I hope you're understanding.
Yes, sir.
So you can have an intermarriage of both your environment and your nature. The environment can help push you towards a particular place where you never need to think of stealing. Because if you have thought about stealing, then, or burglarizing somebody's house, you're also likely to be the one more likely to just shoot all the people in that house without giving it a thought and having no emotions about it. But there are criticisms for why the law is uninterested in indulging in these kinds of discussions. And the first one basically will be that the comfort zone of law will be assailed by new principles. Law is a traditional pursuit. People do not want new principles of law to assault its settled arrangement. 2, the science of free will is not ripe enough to be given judicial representation. Because even as we speak, people are still having discussions as to what constitutes, you just talked about multiple personality. How do we know whether someone even has multiple personality or not before we can start talking about using it as a legal defense? Maya?
Sir, I didn't get it, sir.
You said, I'm still seeing your hand raised. That's why I'm calling you.
Oh, sorry. I didn't know why.
Okay. Now, that the science of free will is not ripe enough to be given judicial representation. We talked about the intermingling of of nature and nurture now in respect of that doctor that carried out one of these studies. And I said, when somebody does not have empathy, you can either be an armed robber who kills 1,000 people without empathy, or you could be a brain surgeon or a rocket scientist that does things without empathy and is at the top of his profession. Now, another one is that there might be chaos in society if there was a departure from strict criminality. That is what Kwajafa, that was one of the points Kwajafa was making now, that people can just come with anything. And the judicial system, especially judges, will be forced to take serious cognizance of those kinds of defenses. And the last one is the sciences will have a stranglehold on the concept of culpability in the criminal justice system. It's like the VAR in football, where the video assistant referee is almost becoming more powerful than the referee himself. And it's the same thing in this argument in terms of what the sciences can do. What is the importance of the sciences? Will law be outsourcing its relevance to the sciences, where the sciences just come and say, okay, this person is so, and law will be forced to accept. And Matthew Jones said there are 3 paths open for the legal system. 1, the legal system can continue as it is. 2, it can accept lack of understanding, that it does not understand all these other things. It's not discrediting it, but it just doesn't have proper understanding to make a decision regarding to specific issue, regarding how other issues affect culpability. And 3, it can discard mens rea, which was the original traditional thing that was done before things started changing. It can discard mens rea for an externalization of criminal culpability. If it happened and you were seen to have done it, you did it. We are not interested in the working of your mind. We don't care whether you have criminal mind or not. You kill someone, you are responsible, period. Any questions or comments?
Comments.
Please.
Besides the court, we have accepted lack of understanding.
I hope that all of us don't have any understanding at all now that we've got to the end of our class.
No, sir, we don't.
It's not like we did not have any understanding or like we did not know what they were talking about, though, but we did not really know, like, I don't even know. I'm just confused, but we don't know what to write, but we are confused.
You know, the point really is, the slides will show you what the arguments are. And I was very careful as not to go one way or the other. The objective was just to point out things for you in terms of how society is interacting with statutes, with the law, and with decisions that judges are making. Whether the judges can, when someone says, I don't know how this happened, whether a judge, for example, can say, no, that is not insanity. Because if someone is insane, he does not know how anything happened. So the objective really is, and this on a larger scale, this tells you that there are many things that should not be settled in law. Many things that law should recognize as areas of inquiry and move into those areas of inquiry. It doesn't matter whether you agree that we should continue as is. It does not matter much whether you think that we should accept lack of understanding or we should externalize criminal culpability. What is important, that's why jurisprudence and aspects relating to jurisprudence is always a process. I like to tell people that enjoy the journey, don't think too much about the destination. Why? Because the journey will just naturally lead you to the destination. So while you're on the journey, try to look at the trees and look at the sky. So for jurisprudence here, what we agree, what you arrive at isn't as important as your thinking process to arrive at whatever it is that you arrived at. And there are different, in the first semester, we were talking about globalization of legal education, whether you can have a global law school or not. In 100 years' time, that discussion will probably still be ongoing. And whatever it is that we have done will just be part of that ongoing discussion. Now for these, and the reason why this discussion is important is you are beginning to see why some countries are very reluctant to institute a death penalty. Why? Because even judges themselves are beginning to think, am I really sure? Have I reached the point where I can sentence someone to death when I have these concerns ruminating in my mind? And the objective really is to be able to think critically, elicit and represent those concerns, and then you may not have a conclusion. Ayub. Ayub Mohammed, you raise your hands. Okay, anybody else with any comment?
Okay, sir, I think if we look at, okay, the basic question now that I can see from this discourse or an idea is whether law should actually, or to what extent should law recognize all these factors, that can say whether a person is maybe criminally or not criminally culpable. And while I feel that, like we were arguing that, okay, the criticism of science of free will not being ripe enough for judicial representation is because there are still so many uncertainties and unclarities in the science itself and in the development of all these ideas and understanding. So now, for the law to now take in all these things with the level of uncertainties that they have would be quite, let's say, dangerous to the law. As we talked about insanity now, people being able to, plea anything they want to do and things like that. But I still feel that maybe there should be a way that they could be recognized. Even if it's under the plea of insanity, maybe extending it in a way, but not too broad. I feel they should be recognized. I don't know if there is a way. I feel the issue would now be to determine the line where they can be recognized without it being abused. Maybe the circumstances of each case will determine. Maybe a reasonable man's test will determine, depending on the circumstance of this case now, each case, to determine justice and fairness. Because these things are things that have been proven maybe to be happening. Many people, and I think in this era or this age, there are many people with a lot of, psychological health issues that are not naturally explainable. And sometimes they are even tracing it to their family or their heritage and things like that. And there are things that affect them in a way. So I feel they should be considered in a way, but there should still be limits because there's still so much uncertainties. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Obviously, there should be limits, and the whole aspect, the whole point of this discourse is that law should not ignore it. That law should come to an understanding and for it to say, this is the position as it is, and not just walk around like there are no discussions. And when we say that Matthew Jones has 3 parts, somebody pointed out to me that the 3 parts were not mutually exclusive, that we can continue as it is and still say we accept lack of understanding. But to say we accept lack of understanding means that you tried to understand. You know, and then we can go ahead and say we are discarding mens rea for an externalization of criminal responsibility. Fantastic. But I don't think many people want to go that path, because there is something when you have the primacy of fundamental human rights and all those kinds of issues, and you're having issues of law and morality, relationship to development in our part of the world and all that stuff. I think people will consider an externalization of criminal culpability being crude and not in tandem with the way things are currently moving. But the first thing is recognition that there's an issue where we do not understand. And part of that lack of recognition, I'll tell you, in the US, I think some few years back, there was the affluenza case. I don't know if you've ever heard of the affluenza case. Who has ever heard of any case that was termed the affluenza case by the media?
Yes, you told us in international law.
Okay. Let me just do a short repeat. This boy woke up, he went for a party, he was going back home, he saw people walking, crossing the road, and he just ran his car and killed how many of them? And then he didn't stop. He went back to his home and took a nap and slept until he was arrested, and later they found out that he didn't say he didn't do this. What his lawyer said was because his parents were so affluent, they were so rich, that they brought him up in a way where the boy himself is not a boy, he's an adult, did not know the difference between right and wrong. And the media called that the affluenza case, which meant that the guy was so affluent that it completely disorientated him relating to whether what he was doing was right or wrong. Okay? And guess what? The most serious charges that came up, he escaped it. Because the key thing that was being used was whether he knew what he was doing was right or wrong. So under those kinds of situations, you can find how these discussions we are having, recognition by this discussion of the legal system, can take care of these kinds of circumstances, because it should have prepared for it. It won't be something that comes before a judge and a judge feels that the level of discretion is at that kind of scale where he can make any kind of decision. And the point is, by leaving it open and leaving it straight to the discretion of each and every judge, you are going to be having crazy cases like the affluenza case. And the strange thing was, what the lawyers tried to do was to equate the guy's statement of mind to insanity. And they bought it. Now, in this situation, what we are saying is, if there are issues like this, the law must make inquiries, have an understanding of what is happening. And when I say the law, I'm not just talking about the legal system. I'm talking about the legislative system as well, which must have an understanding as themselves, do we need to amend or change the laws to bring certain things into cognizance or not? I hope we understand that.
Yes, sir.
So if there are questions or anything, let me know. Now, your assignment for law and social change is this, which is why I basically avoided citing sections in our jurisdictions. What I want you to do is a 3-page assignment paper on free will sections in the Nigerian legal system. free will. And what I mean by free will sections is what I want you to do. Let me explain. Is to isolate all these things, whether it's in the CAC, whether it's in the karma or criminal law or anywhere where you think you have identified some free will sections, where the section says if somebody knowingly or willingly or dishonestly or does this, does that, just isolate those and then try to explain it, and then you can write an article around that. I hope you understand that.
Yes, sir.
So 3 pages.
No, sir. No, sir. We don't get the question.
Write 3 pages on free will sections in Nigerian statutes. Free will sections in Nigerian statutes. It may not be free will. I mean, we just want things that are connected to doing something with your free will that are already in Nigerian statutes. Then you can write a 3-page paper of your understanding of that statute and what limitations you think it has. I hope that was understood.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Thank you,
sir.
sir.
Yes, sir.
So if there are other things, I'm sure people can get across to me on WhatsApp. One of your colleagues has a paper I wrote regarding free will. Hope that she will share it with the class. If she doesn't
Yes,
share it,
sir.
It's
It has
already
been
been shared,
sent.
sir.
it's
I
already been
sent it
shared.
this
Okay.
morning.
So you can do your reading, and please always understand the purpose of what we're doing. Number one, we said everything is impeachable. The objective is to have a discussion, not to have a conclusion in what we are doing. So it doesn't matter whether it's your yes or it's your no or whatever. What we want is the evidence you have laid down for your thinking, and then how you have, we are interested in how you have arrived at your conclusion, not your conclusion. Thank you very much and have a fantastic day.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
I need to, sir.
Thank you, sir.